If you were on the edge of sleep or visiting from an alien world or just plain forgot, you could be forgiven for thinking that these generators were alive and well, that energy and matters flowed through them at imperceptible and incomprehensible speed, that they powered an elaborate Venn diagram of overlapping networks, that men still stood and commanded and wept, that there was still hope for the unrealizable dream. You almost missed the 2nd Street turnoff. How many fucking times have I? You muttered to yourself. You realized because of the huge green billboard for perfume billowing above you. A small drone hovers on the corner, just above a noodle stand. They're just starting to soak into the cityscape now. You do a sneaky U-turn and are met with a litany of sonic abuse. You get out of the car and slip into the warmth. Old Sammy is smoking in his usual place, the end of the bar closest the door, and he nods as you enter. You know this bar, and it knows you. Actually, I was even thinking about buying my landlady something to make it up to her for stealing all those pills. A better TV, perhaps, or at least a bigger one. It really was a shitty TV. She sat so close, but still her eyes were real small, and I wondered if the TV was shrinking them. But I figured it was those big old lenses she wore. But one day I see her shuffling around as the sun's coming up, and they're dark. She doesn't have the glasses on yet. They're really that small and dark, too. Like the TV was shrinking them and maybe pulling all the color out, too. He wandered through this desert on the edge of civilization, waiting for the doomsday clock to wind down and bury him in salt white sand. In later life, it seemed to happen all at once, as his philosophy deepened and his path widened. But now it seemed suspended, was in fact frozen. Time had retreated and burrowed up into a defiant little chrysalis, suspended in an icy lake with only frozen fish for company. All I was ever told was that the light turned purple. I was to disconnect the drive by both SATA leads simultaneously, and that I had a 5-second window to do this. So, in other words, my mission centered around the one part of the entire data center that I had absolutely no understanding of. But what choice do I have? This was a tall order as well. I'm talking at precisely the same time and exactly 5 seconds. I wasn't expecting a janitor, let alone a SWAT team. Perhaps I should go back a little. It all started, when does anything really start, when I finally got the call from Maurice about the settlement process. He'd been on a beach in Mexico for 5 weeks, and I'd been in a basement in England. My environment was hotter, hot as fuck in there. At least I didn't have to deal with the Mexicans. Maurice was a fucker and a fuck-up, but Maurice came through for his friends when it counted. And boy, can Maurice count. Women, money, lines, gas fees. Greedier than a government, slyer than a Chinaman, and loyal as a bull terrier to a lucky few. Point is that apart from Maurice's little sabbatical, this particular global settlement had run as smoothly as his code. Let him suck up the mojitos. Let his endings be happy. This time he extracted a torn and muddy magazine of semi-clothed and unclothed bodies. "This will get your bloods pumping out there in the desert. Bit of the old in and out, yes? Yeah, you tell me you're on a quest, but you're still a bloody man, ain't you? Me and old Tinto will miss that, won't we, boy?" At this point he fussed with his dog for approximately the 100th time. The mole again glanced down at the dog's middle and was finally curious enough to ask, "Isn't that a girl dog?" Bloody girl, you say? Which is what they used to say back before the falling, Sonny. But believe me, you old Tinto might be a girl dog, as you put it, but she ain't nobody's bitch." Now I gotta tell you this, baby. I don't know what it's worth or what it's gonna mean to you, but I gotta tell you. Is it about one of my cases? No, don't get too excited. It might be nothing. Just, network information. Okay. I spent Tuesday chasing a meth head bail skipper all about town, and I finally cornered him to some east side tenement. The fool nearly leapt the 5th story. But when we finally get the rat in a cage, he tells us a few worthwhile things. One is that there's a major shipment of H coming into the East Pier, and then he mentions the McFrenzy brothers within that context. Buying or selling? We don't know yet, maybe brokering, but he also said his buddy told him. So but he reckons that the leprechauns have also moved into the synthetic fentanyl business. Isn't fentanyl already synthetic? Well, then this shit is more synthetic. The bookkeeper has been on your radar since around the time of the Felial case on the very edge of the western part of Chinatown. They didn't really call it that anymore, but like misnamed sex workers, those things have a tendency to defy categorization and stick around. You shiver once again, a double barrel this time, and clench and unclench your fists. Did you take more thorium than you remember? You recall a double drop, followed later by another double drop, 4 in total. You suddenly realize that the car is silent, the music has stopped, but you have no idea when. You were sure you have set the CD on repeat, since when was a loop not infinite? When a serpent finishes eating its own damn tail, that's when. But that's not the weird part. The weird part is he just appeared there one day. Say what now? Mesmeraldo just showed up in a puff of magic smoke when everyone else was sleeping. They found him in a vacant room. He had some stuff with him. Not sure the details, but at least an overnight bag and a framed picture. Know that much. Wasn't booked, expected, no app form or paper trail. Just there. Just there. Just there. And you said none of the other residents have seen him before. Nope. And check this. He has some sort of huge scar on his body that he can't account for either. Stomach, I think. But the clinic I spoke to described it as gnarly and evil looking. Gnarly and evil, hey? He write that in his official statement? Sounds like the whole fucking case to me. It was a long time before I took Bob up on his offer. The days were stretched and murky and gray, and sometimes they went around and around and around in a consummate circle. They stretched out, and my dreams were too long. Sometimes I got confused, and sometimes I got lost, even in the old lady's house, even in my basement room. Sometimes I wasn't even sure what country I was in. And I started to remember random, useless things. At least it all seemed random, and I kept thinking of people I hadn't seen for decades or cared about in the first place, and obsessed on old trivial events. I also began to misremember Maurice, Friend becoming foe. Another reversal of the mirror. That's what she always called me for some reason. Satoshi, like Satoshi Nakamoto. What? Am I? Are you kidding? I fucking wish I was. If I was that freaking smart, I don't think I'd be sat here. She said, Satoshi, beware of the one in the blue armor and get your ass across the wastelands. Weird, right? But I forgot this dream for a while, as you do, and settled back into that jagged sort of rhythm and found pleasure and distraction here and there. I tried the forums, a lot of forums, but it was just more of the same, really, and too much data. I tried to meditate. I awaited a call from Maurice, my thoughts circling around the various possible reasons for this non-contact. I drew up an enemies list, but tossed it in the fire semi-formed. He went on to tell me that inside that box was a single sheet of A4 paper, and he told me what was written on it, but all I can remember is that it was text. I keep trying to remember what it said, but can't. It's been driving me crazy, to be honest, that period when I was waiting to hear from Maurice about the offshore transaction. My mind kept coming back to it, like somehow the heart of my anxiety, the apex of it all, and would provide some type of lonely answer. The lacuna of my soul. I mean, it can't be relevant to all this, can it? A story I'm not sure is true, told to me in a place I'm not convinced exists. Right? Crazy. Bat shit. But yeah, that's him. I'm not saying he murdered any girls or nothing, but that was who I was thinking of. Wait, you said more than one bookshop? Maybe half a dozen businesses, man. Like I say, without speaking to Tom, I couldn't tell you too much. Well, I could really use speaking to Tom then, because what I didn't finish telling you was that there might be a direct link between the missing girl case, this Ivan asshole, and the work we were doing for Yu Peng. Crothers furrows his brow. Really, that does not sound like typical runaway or abduction territory. Yeah, but I'd rather not say too much right now. This case has the type of momentum where it runs off on its own two legs, and I'm starting to feel like I'm chasing a mirage. You finish your coffee, glance out the window as if for inspiration. I could do with speaking to Tom, though, if you're willing to put us in touch. Of course, baby, consider it done. Tell her unearth anything juicy. I remember that boy had a way with an angle. He had one, but I wasn't in awe of it, and it meant one of us going to Montana, and I couldn't rightly justify the expense. What was it? Samara and her best friend's favorite band. There's a connection between them, and a piece of evidence, but all we could unearth was a flyer and a rumor that the founding members are from a small town there. Which one? The bass player and the drummer. Ah, percussion and bass, nasty combination.
Gee, Derek, that woman really does love her doggy. She really should put her clothes on, though. My mama got scratched by our dog once and it got infected. And gee, your uncle doesn't take very good care of his magazines. All the pages are stuck together. Was he eating a sandwich when he read this one? My dad keeps Victorian steam trains weekly in a special cabinet next to our Reader's Digest.
put the paper back in the box, son. Had to, right? Otherwise, they'd have known I was there. Wish I hadn't now. I feel like it could have done me some good. The box was the only weird thing I had found up to that point, but obviously nothing to do with my dog. And I'm getting angry, too. Irritable. Angry as fuck that I had to break into this Muppet's place, and all I can find is a stinking piece of paper. I did see something odd. Small, but odd-like. Scribbling. Little pencil scribblings on the stair wall. You know, like you might see if someone was marking where to hang a skirting board or a picture hook. But these weren't those kind of markings. Too many symbols. Like I said near the start of my ramblings, it fucking zippered open and the bricks parted like the seas for Moses. Yeah, I know why you're looking at me that way. It must have been a dream, right? I was walking down an invisible corridor and came to a big solid bastard of a door, like I didn't know, like you might imagine in a Russian submarine. 6 inches thick and solid steel, and one of those wheel lock things, whatever they are called, and a square mesh window near the top, about eye level, but too fucking grimy to see a single thing inside. Then there's what I can't forget. Sat on a high-backed wooden chair, carved, is a thing that reminds me of that thing in the old TV show where the comedian skeleton is telling horror stories. You know, like a puppet, and he giggles all the time like a meth head. Then a blessing and a curse occurred all at once. The drugs arrived in the post. The drugs I hadn't ordered. It had been so long with this particular brand of brain candy, at least, that I didn't even recognize. I thought to begin with that I was looking at a couple of dried-up baby geckos, like gecko jerky, then some kind of tree bark. But I looked a little closer, and I had a little snuff, and realized I was looking at my old friend Psilocybe cubensis, or one of his/her many similar friends. And not, by the way, thankfully, my old foe Amanita. But that's a story for another day, and you federal types are kind of funky when it comes to gifts of the earth. For a moment, Nurse Sanders pops back into your head. You see a cat, colored funny under the streetlight, creep around a large bin. For a moment you think the silhouette of a person is watching you from the grass embankment, but after a bit more staring, your eyes adjust to reality, a partially lit sign for the road above. The light is funny here, the moon and sodium mixing into light and diffusing into shadow. Behind it, the financial district. Its distinctive, some say iconic, twin building of gold and platinum light. And I watched him a little because, well, you know my situation. I would have watched a spider fuck a beetle if it was on the window. And I see him squat down to tie his shoelaces or something, I presume. But he's there for a while. So eventually I get curious enough to go upstairs to the lady's defunct dining room. Remind me about the dining room later. The dining room was fucking hilarious. Peel back one of those dirty net curtains, older than the TV, and he's trying to open the fiber optic substation, and this was one of the areas that hadn't been upgraded yet. Still ran on a glorified Allen key. But like I already said, if I had been an Electrum media engineer or something, I wouldn't have blinked. But as it was, I was like, what you up to, Newman? This time he didn't go near the substation, but the next day he did, and by now I'd dig out some binoculars to see exactly what he was doing with those fingers of his. They were long, those fingers, piano player fingers, too long and too slender and not right for his frame. Kind of faggy, actually. These were real high-powered blades the old lady was packing, God knows why. To see the TV, maybe. So that's why I could see all the details of his digits. And I could see an ugly little mole just above the middle joint of his right index finger and a little bracelet like like travelers and festival goers have, like a rubber band, a purple one with something dangling off of it. But if it was significant, it was too hard to see. The item, I mean, not the significance. You're on the ward, and you can't tell what's regular activity and what's missing patient trailing IV drip and disappeared into the ether territory. Teller rounds the corner and, approaching, looks excited and disheveled. Nice but uncared for shirt hanging half out. This is his majority setting. You ask, what have we got? What don't we got? First question's probably quicker. One of Teller's exes said that you and Teller were more than just workable partners, that you were a double act. Well, putting the sign aside for now, because obviously that both confirms and confuses more things than we can count. An orderly coming in through the main entrance to the hospital thinks he saw someone stumble out, matching his description. But meanwhile, some geriatric off the psych ward escaped. So I'm walking around this pointless town, and have managed not to think about any of this shit for 5 minutes. No blue night or absentee friends, no lost funds, and old ladies missing in action. When I hear a pair of voices around the corner. Now, have you ever heard a voice that you don't recognize, but it's still familiar to you? Like it holds some meaning special to you. Well, it was like that. Set off a whole cave of butterflies and made me stop in my tracks. And I don't know why, but it did. So I stepped closer to them, but deeper into the hedge so as not to be seen. The meeting has been moved. Oh God, not Ralph again. He's such a fucking venue snob. Nothing to do with Ralph. It's just practicalities. This town is spent, and it's probably time to move on. Do we have some fresh blood? We have some fresh recruit blood. They're totally wrong for the project, and that, of course, makes them totally suitable for the project. Bingo. What exactly did Ross say? He said it is going to be there. It? Yes, you know, it. The, thing. Their totem. I can't see them, but the quality of the silence tells me that Melodious is giving Whiny a hard stare, or something like one, and old Whiny is shuffling about on his feet. Attend the meeting, Eugene. I'm sorry, No, it's okay. No harm, no foul, but attend the meeting at 7:30 p.m. Remember your materials and what I said. Okay, I'll be there. I will try my best to attend. I have to migrate some data from the local warehouse stack, 7:30 Town Hall. But either way, it won't look odd if I don't attend, but I had to pull strings for you. I wondered if everybody involved in this conspiracy was in fancy dress. Actually, thinking about cosplay, I wonder if that's what it was. A silly game for grown-ups. You know, like those whatchamacallits. Yes, I am the only nerd at the table, but I game. I don't play cowboys and Indians. Ah, fuck. Live action. Live action roleplay, yeah, I thought it was that. Or some augmented reality bullshit or some such shit. Fuck, my reality has enough augmentation. Thank you very much. I didn't bother making a note of the address. It wasn't exactly hard to remember, but I decided pretty much straight away that I was going to attend to a meeting where I know nobody and was never invited in the first place. I know it's crazy, but what hasn't been crazy in my life these past few years? I wasn't sure whether I had 2 missions or 1. Would Bob want me to pursue this? And why the fuck would I listen to Bob? I'm taking my marching orders from a cosmic cum-stained puppet? Well, I guess we all need something to believe in, but seriously, WTF? Since when did I start taking advice from psychedelics? But then this rational line of thought quickly vanishes again, to be replaced instantly by this new metascape. I live in a world now where pubs appear and disappear, and I'm charging at windmills or running off cliffs. It's chaos. But what isn't? And at last I'm no longer bored out of my mind in a stranger's basement.